Hey guys, Louie here. This video is going to be about confiscation, but not the traditional confiscation that we talk about, as in gold confiscation of the 30s. We're going to be examining crypto confiscation. And if you say to yourself, well, that's impossible, well, I wouldn't be so sure. Actually, I'm going to try to make the case that cryptos are more likely to be confiscated than gold or silver. All right, and keep in mind, gold was confiscated at one point. So I'll be reading you some information I found online about some current legislation and trying to make the point that the government is not going to stay out of your business. The government has pretty much infinite power, and if we think that cryptos of all kinds are going to continue to operate outside of the control of the federal government, I think we're making a big mistake. And I'm going to try to make that argument. So stick around if you want to find out, can cryptos be confiscated? Thanks. Unraveling the Combating Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing, and Counterfeiting Act of 2017, written by Jeremy Nelson. New legislation has been introduced providing definitions affecting the regulation of digital currencies. This article is written June 15th. I do not know the current status of this bill on Capitol Hill, but let's read about this and look at the risks involved. A piece of legislation, Senate Bill 1241, introduced on May 25, 2017 by Dianne Feinstein, John Cornyn, and Sheldon Whitehouse, would add provisions for regulation of digital currency relating to civil forfeiture. Specifically, the bill would add the terms digital currency or any digital exchanger of tumbler of digital currency to definitions listed in 31 U.S.C. 5312, broadening the definitions of these terms to encompass actionable penalization of those who fail to disclose financial holdings. The bill is described as a measure to improve the prohibitions on money laundering and other purposes. With these proposed amendments, institutions with government ties can now be compelled to participate as agents of the Department of Homeland Security, aiding in investigations. The bill explicitly brings cryptocurrencies under the umbrella of civil forfeiture. It also requires the DHS to provide, within 18 months of ratification, a report on strategies to detect cryptocurrencies at border crossings, which might be difficult since there is no current technology that provides a direct solution to this. Further, the bill expands a previously existing law, 31 U.S.C. 5316, which requires reports on the export and import of monetary instruments to apply to digital currency. The amended law would require those traveling with greater than $10,000 in assets to file a report indicating the total sum. Failure to comply can mean civil forfeiture of all of the individual's assets, irrespective of whether the $10,000 in assets are contained therein, and the possibility of up to 10 years in prison. However, questions arise as to how a government entity would be able to extract assets from digital wallets, which are often backed by encrypted codes inaccessible to third parties. While the possibility of regulators invoking a forfeiture of assets is a reality for those who fail to comply with the new legislation, it remains unclear as to how encrypted digital wallets will be accessed without the compliance of targeted individuals. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute, and I think this is a pretty fair representation of the bill that's been enacted. And I don't actually think that this particular bill is necessarily relevant to the future of cryptos, but I think if you are ignoring it and you are placing large amounts of money into cryptos, then you might well consider the power of the United States government. All the U.S. government has to do to become intrusive is to pass a law. And when it's in their best interest to do so, they will. Okay, I'm going to divert for a little bit here to an article written in Science science.org, sciencemag.org by John Bohannon. Why criminals can't hide behind Bitcoin. In other words, how you can be tracked. Bitcoin, the internet currency beloved by computer scientists, libertarians, and criminals, is no longer invulnerable. As recently as 3 years ago, it seemed that anyone could buy or sell anything with Bitcoin and never be tracked, let alone busted if they broke the law. It's totally anonymous, was how one commenter put it in a Bitcoin forum in 2013. The FBI does not have a prayer or chance of finding out who he is. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and other law enforcement beg to differ. Ross Ulbricht, the 31-year-old American who created Silk Road, a Bitcoin market facilitating the sale of $1 billion in illegal drugs, was sentenced to life in prison in February 2015. In March, the assets of 28-year-old Czech national Thomas Jaruski were seized. He's suspected of laundering $40 million in stolen bitcoins. Two more fell in September. The majority of Bitcoin users are law-abiding people motivated by privacy concerns or just curiosity, but Bitcoin's anonymity is also a powerful tool for financing crime. The virtual money can keep shady transactions secret. The paradox of cryptocurrency is that its associated data create a forensic trail that can suddenly make your entire financial history public information. Academic researchers helped create the encryption and software systems that make Bitcoin possible. Many are now helping law enforcement nab criminals. These experts operate in a new field at the crossroads of computer science, economics, and forensics, says Sarah Meiklejohn, a computer scientist at University College London, who co-chaired an annual workshop on financial cryptocurrencies in Barbados last month. There aren't that many of us, she notes. We all know each other. When Bitcoin first emerged, law enforcement officers were panicking, Majorcan says. They thought that these technologies were dangerous and made it harder for them to do their job. But as the arrests and convictions have rolled in, there's a steady shift towards seeing cryptocurrencies as a tool for prosecuting crimes. Even in the strange new world of Bitcoin, FBI Assistant General Counsel Brett Nye said in September 2015, investigators can follow the money. Unlike money issued by governments, Bitcoin has no Federal Reserve, no gold backing, no banks, no physical notes. Created in 2008, academic paper by a still unknown person using the name Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin is an intellectual artifact. A computer scientist at Pennsylvania State University, it's the frontier of economics. Strictly speaking, Bitcoins are nothing more than amounts associated with addresses, unique strings of letters and numbers. For example, represents 30,000 Bitcoin seized during the Silk Road bust, worth about $20 million at the time. Those Bitcoins have split up and changed hands numerous times since then, and all of the transactions are public knowledge. The past and present ownership of every Bitcoin, in fact, every 10 millionth of a Bitcoin, is dutifully recorded in the blockchain, an ever-growing public ledger shared across the internet. What remains hidden are the true identities of the Bitcoin owners. Instead of submitting their names, users create codes that serve as digital signature in the blockchain. The job of keeping the system running and preventing cheating is left to a volunteer workforce known as Bitcoin miners. They crunch the numbers, etc., 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 etc. They act verifying 10-minute blockchain transactions. Just like any currency, Bitcoin's real-world value emerges as people trade it for goods, services, and currencies. If you're not a miner, you can only get Bitcoins from someone who already has. And of course, you can sell something in return for Bitcoins. The government has infinite power. I mean, it's just literally infinite power. And the corruption at the highest levels often ensures that there isn't much of a recourse. People who are targeted by the US government, who have their own agendas, often wind up the victims of campaigns to take them down and even possibly federal lawsuits. When you are found guilty of money laundering, not money laundering, of, for example, creating an alternate currency, to the United States currency, ask Bernard von Nothaus how his life was after that. All he was doing was putting the value of a silver coin in dollars, stamping it into his silver coin, and trying to do some transactions with it in his community. He was persecuted for years and found guilty, and obviously his life ruined. So, for those that are relying on the anonymity of encryption to protect their cryptocurrencies, um, are really also relying on the freedom that perhaps we should have in our country, but we very likely won't have. We know confiscation of gold happened. We know it happened when it was to the government's advantage to confiscate. We know that they had a vested interest in eliminating gold, um, back in the day. But think for yourself, if it became to the if it was in the government's interest to bring down cryptocurrencies, they could certainly do so. And it seems to me that if the current exchange system, the monetary exchange system, was in trouble, and cryptocurrencies were successful as the alternate, exactly how long do you think it would take them to shut it down and confiscate um, the digital assets? Do you really think they wouldn't be able to? Do you really think they wouldn't be able to find the digital assets? And I ask you this, and I think you all know my bias against cryptos, but when you look at confiscation of gold, which happened, and you look at potential confiscation of cryptos, which could happen, which one provides you the better safety net? Do you know when they confiscated gold, it was only a minority of individuals that actually turned in their gold? A lot of it came from banks, I believe. So when you have possession of an asset, you actually have tangible possession. The government will have to bust into your house and dig up your basement or whatever to get it back, which is a highly unlikely event. If you have your money in digital assets in a digital world, um, and the government capable of intimidating those that know, which asset do you think would be more easily confiscated? By 2013, millions of dollars of world bitcoins were being swapped for illegal drugs and stolen identity data on Silk Road. Like a black market version of Amazon, it provided a sophisticated platform of buyers and sellers, including Bitcoin escrow amounts, a buyer feedback forum, and even a vendor reputation system. The merchandise was sent mostly through normal postal systems. The buyer sent the seller a mailing address and an encrypted message, and the site even provided helpful tips. Investigators quietly collected every shred of data from Silk Road, from the images and text describing drug products to the Bitcoin transactions that appear in the blockchain when the deals close. Ultimately, investigators needed to tie this string of evidence to one crucial missing piece of data: the Internet Protocol, the IP address of the computers used by buyers and sellers. The challenge is that Bitcoin network is designed to blur the correspondence between transactions and IP addresses. All Bitcoin users are connected in a peer-to-peer network over the internet. Data flow between their computers like gossip in a crowd, spreading quickly and redundantly. Among the first researchers to find a crack in the wall were the husband and wife team of Philip and Diana Koshy. In 2014, as graduate students in McDonald's lab in Penn State, they built their own version of the software that buyers and sellers used to take part in the Bitcoin network. It was especially designed to be inefficient, downloading downloading a copy of every single packet of data transmitted by every computer in the Bitcoin network. We wanted to see everything, Philip Koshy said. If the data flowing through the network were perfectly coordinated with everyone's computer sending and receiving data as frequently as the rest, then it might be impossible to link Bitcoin addresses with IP address. But there is no top-down coordination of the Bitcoin network, and its flow is far from perfect. The Koshis noticed that sometimes a computer sent out information about only one transaction, meaning that the person at the IP address was the owner of that Bitcoin address, and sometimes a surge of transactions came from a single IP address, probably when the user was upgrading his or her Bitcoin client software. Those transactions held the key to a whole backlog of their Bitcoin addresses. Like unraveling a ball of string, once the Koshis isolated some of the addresses, others followed. Ultimately, they were able to map IP addresses to more than 1,000 Bitcoin addresses. They published their findings in the proceedings of an obscure cryptographic conference. It is unusual for an academic paper to cause both the New York Times and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to come calling. It was crazy, Philip Koshi said. Their technique has not yet appeared in the official record of criminal case, but the Koshis say that they have observed so-called fake nodes on the Bitcoin network associated with IP addresses in government data centers in Virginia, suggesting that investigators there are hoovering up the data packets for surveillance purposes. The pair has since left academia to teach industry jobs. As criminals have evolved more sophisticated methods to use Bitcoin, researchers have followed apace. Micklejohn, who says she regularly works with law enforcement but is not comfortable discussing the details, was one of the first researchers to exploit Bitcoin mixing services. The basic idea is to protect the anonymity of transactions by swapping many people's Bitcoin stashes with each other in a shell game. The forensic trail shows the money going in, but then goes cold because it's impossible to know whose Bitcoins belong to whom. So in principle, this is a solution to Bitcoin's anonymity problem. But event mixing has weaknesses that forensic investigators can exploit. Soon after Silk Road shut down, someone with administrative access to one of the newly emerging black markets walked away with 90,000 bitcoins from their user escrow account. The thief tried to use a mixing service to launder the money, but wasn't patient enough to hide the tracks, Micklejohn said. It's difficult to push large amounts of bitcoins through mixing services secretly. It's extremely noticeable no matter how you do it. Thomas Jakowski, the main investigator by the Czech police, is suspected to be the thief in question. The beauty of Bitcoin from a detective's point of view is that the blockchain records all. If you catch a dealer with drugs and cash on the street, you've caught them committing one crime, Micklejohn says. But if you catch people using something like Silk Road, you've uncovered their whole criminal history, she says. It's like discovering their books. Exactly that scenario is playing out now. On 20 January of this year, 10 men were arrested in the Netherlands as part of an international raid on online illegal drug markets. The men were caught converting their bitcoins into euros in bank accounts using commercial bitcoin services and then withdrawing millions in cash from ATMs. The trail of bitcoin addresses allegedly links all the money to online illegal drug sales. If Bitcoin's privacy shortcomings drive users away, the currency will quickly lose its value. But the demand for financial privacy won't disappear, and the new systems are already emerging. I don't feel people have the right to know, unless disclosed, how much cash is in my wallet. Just like I don't feel like anyone should know what conversations I'm having with someone else. Matthew is part of a team launching a new anonymous online market called Shadow this year, which will use its own cryptocurrency, Shadow Cash, and on and on and on. Gleam believes the federal government will issue its own cryptocurrency, maybe as soon as 2016. If so, it's likely to require users to verify their real-world identities. That could defeat the purpose of cryptocurrency in the eyes of privacy advocates and criminals, or maybe not. In this technological game of cat and mouse, the next move may go to the criminals. But I'd like you to ponder this question, and before you blow it off and you say, "Oh, it'll never happen," really give it some thought. And I would appreciate, some remarks and some comments. And I know those of you that invest will have alternate points of view. But the question is it possible, given the influence and authority and so forth of our federal government, or all governments? Do we really think the Russians and the Chinese are going to play fair? Perhaps, but I think this is la la land stuff. And although it's real money and it's functioning as real money as we speak, potentially even going up in value, consider the end game of cryptos. There are so many people profiting off these products right now, they're literally printing money. So there are a lot of people that have a vested interest in promoting and seeing the expansion of cryptos. Do we really think it is the future of currency? Yes, the government wants to go to digital currency. Of course they do. They want to track every penny you spend so they can tax you on it or put you in jail for doing things that they don't want you to do. But do we really think that digital currency is going to happen outside of the government's control? And at some point, there will be a switch. I think you'd likely be paid off when they confiscate, because confiscation did include compensation. But if this happens when the government has a major reset, which I believe they will, of the value of the US dollar, you'll likely be paid off in pennies on the dollar. So that's the future I see for cryptos. I guess only time will tell, and I look forward to your comments. Thanks, guys. Louis signing out.